I'm Jesse Kolar. I work as an upland game biologist and supervisor for the department, and I'm based out of Dickinson. For sharp-tailed grouse, every spring we go out. We have established blocks that are about a township in size, and we count all the males that gather on traditional dancing grounds called leks. Mainly we use the males that gather because the females come and go. The males gather at the same spots almost every single day in the spring. So we can use that to tell whether they're doing better or worse than the year before. Yeah, the 2022 and 23 winter was very long. We expected things were going to be down in North Dakota in the spring. For our upland birds, we had pretty good numbers. So for sharp-tailed grouse, we held about steady from last year. No huge spikes in the population, but holding steady is good after a bad winter. Notably, the difference in the counts were that in the western part of the state, we had higher increases, anywhere from 15 to 20% higher than last year. In the eastern part of the state, we did have some areas with decreases up to 15%. However, the access was very difficult in the east. The snows lingered much longer in the east, and people weren't able to survey their entire survey blocks. So some of that can be attributed to that. Brood surveys we're conducting right now. We'll finish the end of August, and we usually spit out a final report the first week in September, which is a good fall forecast for birds. So our spring index for sharp-tail is really important for densities and the number of sharp-tail. The brood routes are important because we primarily harvest juvenile or young of the year birds in the fall. So we use the brood routes for figuring out how many young there are going to be out there, and we get a young per adult ratio, and we also get a brood size estimate. Right now both of those are looking pretty good for sharp-tail. We're seeing 4 to 7 chicks on the average brood size, which is good, a little bit up from last year. And then the birds per mile, we look at that. It's up this year, but we've had really good humid mornings, so that probably drives a lot of the trend as much as actual numbers. It's better to look at the densities from the spring surveys. So there's a portion of the southwest part of the state that's above average, and a portion of the southeast part of the state above average for precipitation. There are places that aren't seeing the rainfall everybody else has been receiving. But in those areas where we've had moisture, things look really good. The grass has recovered significantly since those drought years. So we have good vegetation. We had good vegetation going into this year, so the nesting season was really good. Brood rearing season is really good. So ruffed grouse we survey every spring. We don't get a lot of survey work on them because they're pretty localized. Either in the Turtle Mountains you can find them, or in the Pembina Hills. This year in the Pembina Hills, unfortunately, there was snowpack, and they used a lot of those roads for storing snow, and they were hauling snow. But those roads were closed, and we never did get a good survey in the Pembina Hills. The Turtle Mountains, the good news was that we were up, so despite the long, harsh winter, again, another species we were concerned about, ruffed grouse held their own. In fact, they were up almost by 40%, so they looked good in the Turtle Mountains, and again, no survey results for the Pembina Hills. Partridge, they continue to surprise us every year. We think that this is probably going to be the last year where we see partridge this high. This year again, we're seeing them. They're increasing. Another year of really big brood sizes and lots of broods on the countryside. And yeah, the main ways we determine that, we get people across the state commenting to us or giving us feedback, but we're also doing brood routes, which give us partridge per mile that we observe. Rural mail carriers are conducting surveys for us voluntarily, and they give us information on what they're seeing. And since they drive established routes, they have pretty good conditions to gather data for us. So we get data from them. Their numbers were really, for 2022 and 23, they were really positive, reflecting the increases that we're seeing on all of our surveys. To be honest, it's a little bit of a mystery why upland birds survived the winter as well as they did compared to deer or pronghorn. A few ideas are possibly that we didn't have as many of the severe wind, blowing storm kind of blizzards that usually trap upland birds, suffocate them in drifts and such. And also snow cover, as much as we look down on it, it's also an important thermal cover. So partridge and sharp-tail can both be found in the winter burrowing into snow, and I think that can help them somewhat. As long as they can find food, the snow can be helpful in some ways. So when hunters submit wing envelopes with wings, that we're getting information on the hatch and on specifically the ratio of juveniles to adult that hunters are getting in their bag. And also we can take all the juveniles and we use that little wing fan and we can age them back to figure out how old they were in weeks, and we can determine which week they hatched in. That's useful more for long-term management type things where we give technical information to federal offices for managing CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program, or for our own lands managing when we should be haying, either earlier to get ahead of most of the hatch, or haying later to avoid the peak nesting period. Those are things we use that we appreciate from hunters. Any hunter out there can request envelopes online. There's a request on the website, or it's easy to pick them up in any regional offices. So September, our early seasons are starting up. We'll have our partridge and sharptail seasons opening up that second week in September. And we ask everybody to be mindful. It's a busy time of year. There are a lot of farmers and producers that are going to be out, whether moving cattle or harvesting crops. We ask that you watch the right-of-ways, park in a safe spot, and also where you're not going to be in somebody's way. Avoid any standing crops, even if it's posted plots or posted where you can access the land. And just be mindful that you're not the only ones out there. So our badlands get a lot of pressure with archery and grouse and mountain bikers and everybody else in the fall. The more respectful people are, the better it is, and the longer those privileges will be allowed for everybody to go out and enjoy those areas. We're predicting it's going to be another good season. So far what we're seeing on our brood routes has all been positive. A few areas that we've seen declines, but it's areas that were doing really well last year. So everything's looking pretty good. The far northwest part of the state is probably one area that's finally starting to slow down. It still looks good, but it's not quite as high for the brood numbers as it has been the last 3 to 4 years. So still should be good bird numbers up there, but we might not see the jump next year like we had been seeing every year up till now.